Hertie Summit 2025. Dr. Sam Gijsen, AI in Brain Health. Can we overcome limited data? Dr. Sam Gijsen is a postdoctoral researcher at Hertie AI in Tübingen and at Charité in Berlin. He works with Professor Kay Ritter on multimodal machine learning and representation learning using brain data. Please welcome Sam.
Now, you've probably all noticed that recently it has become possible for us people to talk to computers and for computers to talk back to us. Now, going from simply being able to ask for tomorrow's weather to being able to ask for help with brainstorming or data analysis, the training of language models like ChatGPT requires something like tens of billions of pages of text. And when printed and stacked into a pile, this pile is about 1,000 kilometers high, which is about the width of France. Likewise, generating photorealistic images is now possible with models which are likewise trained on tens of billions of images. But now, what is the situation like when one wants to use AI for brain health with the goal to understand neurological diseases like dementia and epilepsy, as well as psychiatric diseases like depression and schizophrenia? This is amongst our goals at the Hertie Institute for AI in Brain Health. And personally, I'm really interested in making sure that the benefits of AI can help us diagnose and cure disease. Compared to that pile of 1,000 kilometers, if we would print out all of the brain scans that we have access to and put them in a stack, this stack would reach up to about my waist. Now, we have incredible data sets, but I think it is clear that the data regime is really very, very different. And so that begs the question, how can we overcome limited data such that we can generate similar progress with AI in brain health? We will not be able to just train ever larger and larger models. Again, we don't have the type of data for that. And we're not going to sit around and wait for that data to arrive. So we need to get clever. And today, I want to talk through three potential ideas how we can make progress in brain health despite the limited data. For the first example, I'd like to start off with an analogy. So imagine that we're trying to teach a child something about building a car. Theoretically, it's possible to go directly from a pile of molecules to a car. But I think it's clear that it's a much better idea to provide some reasonable building blocks as a starting point and let them experiment and figure it out from there. Likewise, if we scan the brain and we measure the brain activity in a region every second or so, we'll be able to see how the activity in a region changes over time. Now, we could give those changes in brain activity in every region, of which we measure maybe 100,000, all to the model. And probably with sufficient data, the model could figure out the relationships between all of these regions by itself fairly well. But again, we don't have that kind of data. And so, like in our analogy, we can try to provide some reasonable building blocks for the model. We know that the brain consists of networks. We also know that these networks are disrupted in disease. And so what we can do is we can give this network structure to the model such that it doesn't need to recover and learn this structure from scratch. And basically, we can then focus the powerful learning ability of modern AI there where we think it counts. That is, disruptions in the network structure that relates to disease. In other words, we can look to neuroscience and all the understanding that it has generated to give the models a head start and thereby help them overcome the severe data limitation. For the second option, I want to talk about the flexibility that modern AI gives us. So let me first lay out another problem to you. We can quite easily and harmlessly measure brainwaves at the scalp. But as you can imagine, those brainwaves first need to travel through the skull, through the hair, and that tends to mess up the signals quite a bit. We can get much cleaner data by directly recording at the brain, and this type of data also gives us more information about disease. But it has the downside of needing to open up the skull. And so that tends to only be done when surgery is required anyway. But notice that in both of these cases, we are recording brain signals with electrodes. And we're discovering that models trained on sort of the clean data directly recorded at the brain can learn a lot about how the brain works and apply that when we use the models on these sort of noisier and much easier to obtain scalp recordings. Right? And so in this way, we can transfer knowledge and we can use different piles of data that we have. And in this case, transfer this knowledge from the rarer, cleaner data to much more common and everyday data. For the third example, we make use of this kind of flexibility even more. And we're learning how to make these models learn a lot more like we ourselves do. So traditionally, a model would be learned in a way where you show a brain scan and then a simple label that is provided by an expert, which says healthy or diseased. But I think it's clear that if you would want to train a physician in this way, that would be a rather silly way to go about it. Ideally, you provide much more information. Which parts of the recording are relevant to disease, and why might this particular individual be diseased or not? And so, as I said, we're now learning to do this with these kind of models. Namely, routine clinical brain recordings in hospitals often are accompanied by a clinical report which describes the patient as well as observations made during the brain recording. And basically, by combining brain models with model language models, we've enabled these models to teach themselves by reading the reports and looking at the scans. And we find that this not only makes the models better at detecting disease, they can do so even without receiving any expert labels at all. And so at this point, if we return to our original question about how can we make progress in brain health despite this data limitation, I hope that these three ideas have given you some indication of all the new possibilities that we have gotten due to sort of the modern AI paradigm. And personally, I'm optimistic, given all of these new possibilities, that we will be able to make some progress. However, of course, this is ongoing research into open questions. And so on the one hand, there will be many additional ideas to pursue and explore, but also many challenges still to tackle. So the data limitation that I've discussed is, of course, still a significant hurdle, and the brain is just really profoundly complex. And so, compared to language and image models, despite my optimism, I think it's realistic to say that the timeline of AI and brain health is going to be much slower and a much more complicated one in comparison. Thank you.